Good morning, everyone. I'll declare this meeting of the Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel open at 9:31 and acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and that we acknowledge the Aboriginal people as traditional custodians of Western Australia and pay our respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of those regulations. Members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. Today, for our panel, we have apologies for Councillor Aaron Bowman, Local Government DAP member, City of Swan. We have no members of absence, and we have noting of minutes on the website for previous meetings. So for today's meeting, part 2 for the City of Swan, the panel is myself, Karen Hyde, as presiding member, Mr. Jean Coltes as deputy presiding member, Ms. Francesca Lafonte as specialist member, and Councillor Jennifer Catalano, Councillor Rod Henderson, our panel members from the City of Swan. Could I please ask panel members to acknowledge with a show of hands that they have duly considered all of the documentation within Part B of the agenda and any related information in Part B. Thank you. Thank you. Full show of hands, all have duly considered. Disclosures of interest. I have made a disclosure of interest for item 4.2 on this agenda as an impartiality interest, as I have previous to this current appointment worked for Taylor Borough Barnet until the end of September this year. So I will be leaving the meeting at the end of item 4.1 and hand over to Mr. Coltas, who will then act as presiding member. Could I please ask the elected members, were either of the items today considered at council meetings?
Madam Chair, if I may, the previous application, I have tried to find out if in fact it did come to council, but haven't been able to verify, albeit that this is a different part, but I just want to be sure that I wasn't conflicting with any previous.
Yes. Okay. Well, in that regard, we'll just note the standing declaration. Obviously, these are two Form 2 items, which may well have not come before council, but acknowledging that previous items may have, we'll just acknowledge the standing declaration of interest in accordance with section 249 of the DAP Code of Conduct, that there may well have been a previous participation in council meetings, but that you are not bound by any previous decisions or resolutions of the local government and undertake to exercise your independent judgment in relation to the matters today. Comfortable with that? Thank you both. So moving ahead with our agenda, we have nothing at item 3 and item 4. We have Form 2 DAP application item 4.1 for lot 81 Bushmead Rose, Hazelmere, proposed industrial premises. We have a request for a short presentation from Bell Smithies. We also have in attendance Mr. Grant Wallace from Wallace Drilling, who is not presenting but is available for questions. I know you didn't want very much time for your presentation, but just I'd remind you that they are limited to 3 minutes under the DAP standing orders. So when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Presiding Member. And good morning, panel members, city and staff. As you said, my name is Belle Smithies and I'm a Senior Town Planner at Road Group. We represent Wallace Drilling and I am joined by their Managing Director and CEO, Grant Wallace, today. We're here as the applicant for item 4.1, being minor modifications to the approved industrial premises at 201 Bushmead Road, Hazelmere. Thank you for giving us a moment of your time. On behalf of Wallace Drilling and the project team, I am pleased to say that we fully support the officer recommendation, including all of the proposed amendments to the conditions. We're grateful to the City of Swan staff for the collaborative approach they've taken with the application, including this application as well as previous applications for the project. The amendments we're seeking your support for today will better suit Wallace Drilling's operational needs and enable efficiencies in the design. The builder commenced site works earlier this year, so we're now very close to getting the project off the ground and Grant and his team into their new headquarters. The city's RAR is comprehensive and we have nothing further to add. Grant and I really just wanted to make ourselves available to answer any questions from the panel. We respectfully request that the panel approve the application as per the officer recommendation. We thank you for your time and welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. I might refer to our panel members on screen first of all. If you have any questions of the applicant and presenter. Councillor Henderson, any questions? Okay, thank you. Councillor Catalano, you have a question?
Yes, thanks. I noticed that the proposal refers to remnant vegetation along the eastern and western boundaries. And yet when I look through the drawings, looks like the vegetation's all going to be removed. So just want you to clarify what's happening with that remnant vegetation there.
On the east and west boundaries.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. Yes, so I do believe that much of that will be removed. We do have a landscaping plan that complies with the city's landscaping requirements in terms of the amount of site area that is used for landscaping, which was really fairly unchanged from the previous version. I understand one of the conditions of the approval also requires a more detailed landscaping plan to be provided. Yeah, so that will be removed.
Okay, all right. So they're pretty mature trees, those ones. And that's a loss of shade and cover. I just wanted to ask you about the landscaping because this today is a proposal to reduce the amount of landscaping from what was originally approved. So it's not clear in your report what the eventual amount of landscaping is that you're asking for. Do you mind giving me a figure for that?
Yeah, I do have that number. If you give me a moment, I can pull it up.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I can walk you through the sort of changes over time. So in the original approval, there was an area of 4,467 square meters.
Yes.
That was then increased in the first amendment to 4,797. And then this application proposes to reduce it down to 3,746 square meters. Now that's still 11.4% of the site, which is in excess of the 10% minimum that's required under the City of Swan's.
Yeah, all right. I wasn't clear about that. So
did you have another question, Councillor?
I do, yes, please. Thank you. Now, getting back to tree cover in your development, I mean, obviously there's going to be now a deficit of tree cover on the site. What kind of trees are you thinking of planting in the development there?
So I don't know that I have that in front of me.
Yes, in front of Building A will be a rose garden, but Graham and Jamie Wallace, who are the shareholders of the business, are strong believers in the environment, and the intention is to be all native trees, bar those rose bushes in front of Building A.
And
okay.
I just wanted to... Sorry.
Fine. All I was interested was the trees, actually, not the rose garden. And so thank you for letting me know that that they were thinking of putting in natives and that they are environmentally conscious or want to do the right thing by the environment. So the next question that I have is, would they be amenable to samaris being planted in there? Because they are native trees.
Member Catalano, I think that's part of the previous decision. So the previous approval would have covered that aspect. That's not what's before us today. We've got 3 amendments under the Form 2. So my understanding is we can raise this with the city officers, but my understanding is that that's covered by the previous approval and that the applicant is working with the city on that process under that previous approval. But we can certainly raise that.
Thank you. I will raise that with the city staff. Thanks very much.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions? Panel members around the table. Mr. Coltaz? Ms. Lafante?
No.
Thank you. And I also do not have any questions of the applicant today, so thank you for that. What we will now do is refer our questions to the local government officers, and we have Bella Morton, have I pronounced your name correctly, online from the city?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you very much, Bella. So questions from the panel of Miss Morton. Councillor Henderson, did you have any questions? No, thank you. Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. So Bella, don't know if you just heard my question to the proponent, but I was wondering, like, will the city be working with the proponent to put in marri trees on the site in the development?
Yes, because that is one of the conditions of approval. So when they submit a landscaping plan, we make sure that they comply with the city guideline in landscaping, and we impose the native vegetation.
And will those native vegetation be marri trees? Or do
we can impose that, yes.
Yeah, or do we have to put in a advice note with this decision here today?
Yes, we can go with advice note as well.
Advice note, okay, that's right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And what is the number of trees that you think? How many trees are they proposing to put on that site? Do you know? Because it's not in there.
Not at the moment. We don't have that information.
Okay. All right then. Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Mr. Coltas, of the city officers?
No, Councillor Henderson has.
Okay, Councillor Henderson, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just want to be clear. Did you say that you were going to effectively require marri trees as part of the landscaping plan, or is it part of the overall consideration?
Technically, there is no requirement at the moment. We have city guideline for landscaping. So when they submit their landscaping plan, we make sure they're complying with those requirements. And if, for example, there is a certain type that we want to impose, we will consider in that stage.
Right. So am I clear? I want to be absolutely clear. There won't be any requirement if the developer doesn't want to use those trees. There won't be a requirement for marri trees, but there will be a requirement for some native trees.
Yes.
Okay, I want to be clear. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coltas, do you have any questions of the city officers? No. Ms. Lafante, did you have any questions, city officers?
No.
I don't either. So if there are no further questions of the city officers, we will refer to the item before us on our agenda, and we are recommended to accept this as a Form 2 to approve, and we have 3 amended conditions, condition 3, condition 7 and condition 16. So in the first instance, I'm looking for a mover, please, for that as the primary motion.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Mr. Coltas. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Ms. Lafante. Sorry, I'll come to you. I'll come to you, Councillor Catalano. We need now to allow the mover to speak to the motion. Thank you.
Yes, look, this is a fairly straightforward request for modifications to an existing approval. The modifications are all supported by the council staff in the responsible authority report. The conditions that they've requested to be amended, the council staff are all listed, and they're fairly straightforward and don't really affect the original intent of the approval. So I'm supporting it.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lafante, seconder.
Thank you. From my perspective, the proposal before us does not substantially change the development, and accordingly is consistent with the DAP regulation 17(1)(c) to be considered by us. I've given due consideration to this proposal, the RA comments, as well as all the material provided, as well as discussions today. The minor changes that are proposed are consistent and appropriate from my perspective. The reduction in landscaping, I note, however, it does exceed the requirements as identified in the RAR, therefore is appropriate. And the proposal is also indicated as being consistent with the Hazelmere enterprise area structure plan, and as far as I'm concerned, it's an appropriate development, and I support the Form 2 changes associated and the associated condition modifications.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vante. Did any other member wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Catalano, thank you.
Well, can I move an amendment, which being that there's an advice note attached to this for the city and the proponent to investigate the planting of marri trees in the development?
So the wording of your amending motion as a new advice note for the city proponent to investigate.
Well, let's put the city.
Consider.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the wording straight. For the city and proponent to consider the planting of native vegetation?
No, the planting of marri trees. And I might have to give you the name of them. Calophylla.
Yeah, that's okay. Of marri trees as part of the landscape plan.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So that is moved as an amending motion, a new advice note by Member Catalano, which would read, the city and proponent to consider the planting of marri trees as part of the landscape plan. Is there a seconder for that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Mr. Coltaz is seconding that. Did you wish to speak further to it, Member Catalano?
Well, I'm sure that all the panel members here, well, I'm not sure, but you know, most of the panel members here have heard me speak on this before. And I mean, it's not something that I can stop talking about because unfortunately, particularly in Hazelmere, but really right across the city and in fact, right across the metro area, we're losing these particular marri trees at, like, you know, just there's none of them left hardly. And if we really do want to protect, you know, the biodiversity of our region, and if we do want to protect habitat for, you know, these endangered species like the Carnaby cockatoos, provide, you know, foraging and nesting and nursery trees for them, you know, for future generations, you know, which is basically, you know, protecting our environment. We do need to start thinking about planting these native trees and specifically marris, because these are, you know, they are the central tree to the coastal plain. Then we need to start talking about them and putting them into our development plans, because we've got to learn at some point to be able to coexist with nature. And we haven't been doing that, and we've got to do it. We've got to do it now, because otherwise it's a very, very frightening future, I believe.
All
so
right.
that was just that, and I would say, you know, I apologise that I have to keep going on about it, but unfortunately, until we see some change, I feel it's my duty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Coltaz, did you wish to comment?
Yeah, look, it is an advice note. It's and I'm sure that the applicants have already indicated they will consider the use of marri trees. Marri trees are a very large tree, and they do have a habit of dropping the seed pods or nuts from them. They can get quite large, but in this case, I looked at the plan, there's a landscape swale that perhaps can incorporate that away from sensitive buildings or parking areas, etc. And so there is an opportunity here. But I reiterate once again that it is an advice note, and if the council has a particular reason for mandating marri trees, then I suggest, Councillor Catalano, you take that up during as a policy of the council, and incorporate it in landscape conditions or landscape policies. But in this case, I see there is a limited opportunity or an opportunity to put some in, and therefore I'm supporting the advice note.
All right, thank you. Did anybody else any other member wish to speak to the amending motion? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Please excuse my voice. I've got a throat infection. Look, indeed, we could plant quite an amount of native trees in the open available space. Agreed. What concerns me is that we're seeing a continual argument that marri trees are more important than other native trees. And we do have, by the way, a great abundance of marri trees. They're all over the place. They don't belong in industrial areas, and that's the key thing here that worries me, is that if we grow force effectively, and I recognise it's an advice note, but I don't want the city staff to get the idea that this is the norm and that we should be pushing this into industrial areas, because I don't believe for a moment that they belong in areas where people park their cars, where they move around, perhaps trip hazards and the like. The key point about native plantings is to do it in a sustainable and proper way, and that's what I believe staff work with when they look for doing tree plantings with developers. So as much as the idea within an advice note might be a good one, the point is that these kind of advice notes could be ultimately taken up to be something more than that by city staff when planning's done. So in that regard, and for decent and proper planning in our industrial areas, we need to be aware of the implications that they might have in the future. But more the point, the city needs to get focused on planting marris in particular in its public parks and the like. That's where we should be doing our plantings to ensure on our land that we're looking after nature. That's the key here. We shouldn't be imposing things on industry that might not necessarily be good for them in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Henderson. Did anybody else wish to speak? Mr. Fante, thank you.
Thank you. I do have some reservations, and whilst I note that it is an advice note, my reservations are that we have heard today and been provided today by the officer information on the policy details, which clearly relates to native vegetation. I am not supportive of adding a specific condition regarding marri trees. I am not an expert in that space. My comments, however, are a planning-based comment, and that they are that whilst the inclusion of specific landscape tree species has a merit, from my perspective, it requires appropriate investigation by the local council in its local context and should form part of the policy position for which we will be able to make a decision on. So in this particular instance, I am not supportive of specifically putting a type of tree in the absence of a policy investigation and supporting justification which specifies that in the local context relative to development forms and types.
Thank you, Mr. Fante. I'll speak to the amending motion. I'm afraid I share the same view of Mr. Fante and Councillor Henderson. I find that there are a number of species mentioned in the City of Swan preferred species. I think it's appropriate to take into account the context, the bushfire conditions, and the nature of the industry, which is at this point a high-risk industry. So I think that the previous work that the applicant is already undertaking to discuss with the city the landscape plan and what level of native vegetation and other vegetation should occur should be adequate without referencing further species as part of, albeit an advice note. So I'm afraid I'm not able to support the amending motion. Did you wish the right to reply, Councillor Catalano, or did you have anything further to say before we vote?
Well, there's two things I want to say. This is not just about industrial areas; it's about basically everywhere.
Yes, so
and
this is about this particular application, which is an industrial application, Councillor.
I know, but I'm not just concerned with industrial areas. I'm talking about everywhere. But yeah, okay, this is industrial area, so this is why we're talking about it there. I mean, it should be everywhere. We should be able to coexist with nature everywhere. And they are large trees, but you know, if you go down to Gosnells, you'll see that there's 200-300-year-old marries down there that people live with, and they do. You know, honky nuts are one thing, but they're not an absolute impediment to you know, being able to coexist with our biodiversity. And at the end of the day, these are very important trees, and we are losing them at the rate of knots. And whilst, you know, I understand, you know, you can't support it, and that is still something that I need to raise at these discussions, because otherwise you'll never hear it. So thank you again for listening, and it's a pity that we're going to lose this opportunity once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's put this to the vote then. Those in favour of the amending motion, Mr. Coltaz and Councillor Catalano. Those against the amending motion, that's Mr. Lafante, Ms. Hyde and Councillor Henderson. Thank you. The motion is therefore lost. Now, I think everybody has spoken apart from Councillor Henderson on the primary motion. Did you wish to speak to the primary motion, Councillor Henderson?
No, I don't believe there's anything further to add. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Do you wish to close?
No, I don't think I think we've had a good session on the merits of the application.
All right, thank you. So let's vote on the primary motion as per the RAR. Those in favour? That's Mr. Lafante, Mr. Coltaz, Ms. Hyde and Councillor Henderson. Those against? Councillor Catalano. The motion is carried 4-1. Thank you. That draws that item to a close and sounds my farewell to the meeting. I now hand over the presiding member to roll to Mr. Coltaz. So if you just indulge me while I unplug and move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ready to go? Okay, well, thank you, Karen. I will now go into item number 4.2, which is 26 Central Avenue, Hazelmere, proposed warehouse and incidental offices. This is another Form 2, which seeks amendment to previous approval. And we do have a presenter, Mr. Jared Ross from Taylor Borough Barnett, I should say, to make a presentation regarding the amendments proposed. Mr. Ross.
Thank you. Thank you, presiding member. Thank you, panel members. As you said, my name is Jared Ross. I'm a principal with TBB. With me today is Deborah Burrows from Indev. We are here representing the proponent for the Form 2 amendment for 26 Central Avenue from Hazelmere. In terms of the site context, so the site's depicted on the screen. It's 26 Central Avenue. It's wedged between two Western Power facilities. The site was approved by the Development Assessment Panel earlier this year for the development of 4 warehouse tenancies. It went through quite an extensive assessment period through the City of Swan and through the Design Review Panel and was ultimately supported by everyone. It also has an existing approval and current use as hardstand storage, and that's what's depicted on site. So that approval was granted last year and enacted this year and is now leased as hardstand for the front portion of the site. We are seeking an amendment which relates to Unit 4 of our approval granted by the DAP, with a minor amendment to Unit 3 as a result. So the site plan for the existing approval is depicted in the bottom corner there. So the amendment proposal, there aren't any changes to Unit 1 or 2. They remain as approved, and the car parking and landscaping fronting the street also remains as approved. There is a proposed minor reconfiguration to Unit 3, and as a result, there's a reduction in warehouse floor space of 150 square metres. The amendment primarily relates to Unit 4. It is now leased. It was proposed to be leased during the application. It is now leased to Main Roads as the future tenant, so it has been designed specifically for them as a tenant. They require a warehouse and transport depot for storage and distribution of their traffic management equipment and their vehicles. The overall amendment proposes an increase in the car parking across the site, so it goes from 122 bays to 169 bays total. That actually works out as an increase in car parking available for all units. So there are 67 bays dedicated for Main Roads use as the tenant of Unit 4. The remaining 3 tenancies share the balance of those car parking bays. There's 102 bays available for them, which is an average of 34 bays per unit. There is also we have maintained the landscaping at above the 10% required. So there has been a reduction in the landscaping from the original approval because we've provided more car parking. Although the landscaping has reduced, the number of trees to be planted on site has actually increased, and we still have maintained that above the 10% threshold that the city's policy requires. So it's important to note that this is a staged implementation as well, and this is something that caused a bit of debate during the assessment of the application. So Unit 4 is to be constructed immediately following approval. As I said, we have entered into the lease, so it is intended to be constructed immediately. The hardstand lease is to remain across the frontage of the site as a component of Stage 1. Access and egress for the Unit 4 tenancy will be gained via that northern access driveway. So it will be a 2-way driveway. It's a 10-metre wide driveway, so it is quite wide for access purposes and will be more than sufficient for the access arrangements. And there's dedicated parking for Main Roads employees to the north of the warehouse and transport depot that will be accessed via that driveway. And Stage 2 will be the construction of the Units 1 to 3 and the shared car parking areas in the remainder of the site. We have made two requests for modifications to the conditions. So we met with the city officers following the publication of the RAR to discuss these, and we understand that the modifications are supported by the city officers. So the first relates to Condition 3. Condition 3 requires that we deliver all 169 bays prior to occupation of the development, as a literal interpretation of that condition. As I said, it's a staged proposal, so we can't deliver all 169 bays at occupation of the first unit. The intention is to deliver those first 67 bays as part of Unit 4. The remaining 102 bays will be delivered as part of Stage 2. So what we have requested is a modification to the condition as shown on screen, which simply separates out those 2 stages and confirms that we will deliver those prior to occupation of each of those stages. Modification 2 relates to Condition 22. So this condition requires that the car park access gate is removed from the driveway access for the purpose of Unit 4 and relocated to be accessed by the shared car park from the north. The problem is the shared car park from the north won't be delivered as part of Stage 1. It will only be delivered as part of Stage 2. That area is actually currently used as a drainage swale for the purpose of the hard stand. So there can't be any access from that shared car parking in the first stage. We've clarified this with the city and confirmed that the intent is that access to the car parking area is temporary for the purpose of Stage 1 and will be relocated so that it is accessible from the shared car park at the stage that Stage 2 is occupied. So what we have proposed is a condition that makes that clear, that the car park entry and exit to the Unit 4 car park is temporary only, and that will be removed at the point that Stage 2 is delivered. I know that there was concern with traffic safety and traffic management for the purpose of that driveway, noting that the driveway will be used for Main Roads vehicles being passenger vehicles and heavy rigids. So the heavy rigids will be 12.5 metre rigids as a maximum. It is a closed facility, so I do need to be clear that this is not somewhere where visitors will be coming or couriers will be coming or the like. It is a closed facility that's accessible for Main Roads staff. So Main Roads employees driving into the car park, collecting the trucks or whatever vehicles they are using for their maintenance purposes or their traffic management purposes and exiting. So it will be fully managed by Main Roads. I think that's it. So in closing, we believe the amendment proposal is quite minor and broadly consistent with the original approval. We greatly appreciate the officer's guidance and the RAR recommendation, subject to those suggested modifications, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jared. Panel members, are there any questions of the presenter? Yes, Francesca.
I have a question to the presenter. Can you speak a little bit further just about modification request 2? I note in the documentation that we've been provided, it refers to condition itself changes. There's also an annotation that you've referred to. Can you speak to the to those elements, or that element, please, the annotation?
Yeah, sure. I might go back to it. So what we had discussed with the city officers in our meeting with them last week was that it would be beneficial to have both a condition that specified that the gate was to be relocated at the point that stage 2 is occupied, and an annotation on plan to make certain that that was very clear that that was going to occur. So it is both the condition and the
certainty.
Yes, correct. Okay. There is also an existing annotation on the plan that relates to condition 22, so it's essentially a replacement of that annotation as well.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Thank you. Any other panel members wish to have a question? Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. You've got peppermints, or this is, I'm referring to the landscaping section, because I see that you have wanted, that you're wanting to reduce the amount of landscaping. And in your tree list, you had peppermints. I wondered whether you were aware that the other trees in your tree list are in fact not native, local native trees. Are you aware of that?
No, I wasn't. The landscaping plan that's been prepared was prepared in accordance with the guidance published by the City of Swan. We are required under a condition of the existing approval to prepare a detailed landscaping plan, and will be further guided by the City of Swan officers with respect to species selection.
Okay.
So,
and would you also be prepared to look at planting marries in this? Because I noticed there's going to be a lot of trees that are going to be knocked over on this site for this development. Are you prepared to put in some marry trees as well as those?
I'll just clarify. There are no trees on the site at the moment, or there are a few with any trees
there's
on the
trees
site.
in the front landscaping that have been planted
Yes.
to the hard stand.
Yes.
So there are new trees,
Yes.
but there were no trees prior to that.
Right. Okay.
Since we purchased the lot.
Okay. All right then. Well, obviously it's been cleared of trees, and there were trees there at one time, which wasn't that long ago. I'm just wondering whether you would be amenable to discussing with city staff the planting of marries in your development, as well as the peppermints or the Agonis plexuosa, instead of these other trees which actually aren't contributing to local biodiversity.
We will discuss that. We actually updated our landscaping plan during the process of this amendment due to the shot hole borer as well. So we were guided by the city to change some of the species during that process as well. I'm unsure of exactly which ones we changed out, but our landscape architect replaced those on the new plan. But we're happy to speak with the city officers about the selection of trees.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't get your name.
Deborah Burrows.
Deborah Burrows. Sorry, Deborah. Sorry, I do recall that it was listed somewhere. Thank you. Any other questions of the presenters, panel members? Yes, Councillor Henderson.
Yes, actually, it's of the city staff. I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's yes, the city staff.
Perhaps Mr. Russell, during this process of the expansion of the site, and to ensure that all of these link together, what processes will the city follow to monitor and to ensure that everything's being done as per the proposal?
For you, Mr. Presiding Member, if I understand the question, what processes or actions will the city staff take to ensure that the development fulfills its conditions through the stage of being constructed. If that's the question, the ordinary course is that there'll be subsequent further information that the proponent will need to provide, the sort of information detailed as requirements and conditions. The applicant submits those, and that includes things such as a landscaping plan, but I won't venture more on that at this stage. And we will review those documents, approve those. Ordinarily, there's been little cause historically for us to find that proponents have not constructed their development in accordance with the approval, but if the reference might be to the stage development and what Mr. Ross has explained is the transition in access to the main road site from the access arrangements for what will be stage 2, then certainly that is no more complicated than if and when a site inspection or confirmation being provided by the applicant that they have transitioned out the access arrangements for main roads once stage 2 is developed. So that's quite easily resolved.
Thank you.
Francesca, do you have any questions?
I have a question to the officer.
Yep.
My question to the officers, thank you for the information, Laura. My specific questions to the officers are twofold. The first is I'm interested in hearing your comments on the requested modifications that has been presented to us today. And
no, they're all good because we're all good because we discussed that in detail in a meeting with Mr. Ross. So this is one we've pre-prepared for you.
Thank you. And my second question is, I know that the applicant has provided commentary today that the unit is specifically designed for main roads. My question is a planning question on land use. And does this design, are there any issues that you raise, or have you any issues raised in relation to the generic use of that tenancy? My understanding from reading the RA is the tenant has not been given any consideration in relation to the proposed assessment, and the proposal stands compliant with or appropriate within the planning framework, regardless of the tenant, the occupant. And I'm specifically talking to that a building will outlast the tenant. So I understand from the RA you are comfortable with the changes made in the context of that site, regardless of the tenant.
If I understand your question correctly, in essence, we have contemplated, or this amendment, let me say this amendment was advanced on the clear basis from Mr. Ross that the tenant in question was main roads. And he's articulated that what main roads will be doing is using this in effect as a form of a vehicle depot. They'll be parking vehicles there. So we have contemplated here that what is being proposed for tenancy 4 from a land use planning perspective is in addition to the existing warehouse approval, the addition of a transport depot approval or a transport depot use. But we're comfortable, that's permissible, and we're comfortable that that doesn't raise any additional parking requirements. So in terms of all of the planning considerations, but we have considered the particulars of main roads as a tenant for the reasons I've outlined in terms of its implications from a land use perspective, differing from a warehouse, but all the other consequent planning implications, most particularly in relation to car parking, have been satisfactorily addressed as per the RA.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Mr. Russell. Panel members, any further questions of the city officers? If not, thank you. Thanks, presenters and Mr. Russell. Now, I will now move into the item, which is the approval and with requested amendments. Can I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation, please? The current RA.
No, not the current RA. Sorry.
Well, there is a current, and then we can move amendments.
Okay.
Or,
well, I'm comfortable in moving the
Yep.
RA inclusive of the amendments
Yep.
that are
Okay.
presented today
Mhm.
in the applicant's submission and word for word as presented.
Okay.
And as has been confirmed by
Current
city
officers.
officers as being acceptable
Okay, so you move.
modifications.
Just confirming that's with the wording changed on the plan as well as per that.
Yes, that
so
includes
then
the annotation on the plan.
Thank you.
Yep, so
Okay.
it is the changes to condition 3 as proposed and as provided by applicant in the documentation we've received, and condition 22 wording provided by the applicant, including annotation.
On the plan. Okay, all right, we have a mover for that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henderson. Thank you. Francesca, you want to speak to the...
Yes, I will start by saying thank you to everybody. The information provided is very clear and I was able to follow it and understand what you're referring to in particular in the context of this development, noting that I was not part of the original proposal that was determined. From my perspective, this proposal satisfies the DAP provisions and is suitable as a Form 2 application, does not substantially change the development. Thank you to the officers for the further clarification regarding land use. From my perspective, the changes to both land use are appropriate, as well as the modifications of the proposal itself from the original application, and they are consistent with the planning framework, including the Hazelmere area. From my perspective, those proposals will appropriately address the functioning of the development and reflect the staging of the development to ensure that the site operates both throughout the stage development and in its final form without implications to the site operations or the local area. I'm satisfied the proposal is appropriate in its context and these modifications are acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, a seconder, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's been well covered by the mover. Nothing further to add.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak to the item? Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. Look, I'm not going to put us through the agony of another advice note. I can see that it's probably not going to be supported today for marries to be planted. I'm very concerned that we've had 2 applications today to reduce the amount of landscaping. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, these things might look great on paper and they satisfy all the conditions and, you know, the regulations and everything. But if you go out there, you'll see the devastation that it's causing to the environment. And it's just not acceptable. I mean, I notice that the design review panel, they actually did sort of make a recommendation that there'd be more that there'd be shade trees be provided between Lloyd Street and the parking area. They basically want, you know, more native trees. And by native trees, they've got to be local native trees. I mean, you know, there's no point planting gum trees from the eastern states. We've seen that already in Perth. We've seen it, and it's contributing to our biodiversity. It's not contributing to our landscape. It's not contributing to the future of the other species in our environment. And, you know, I take your point about this has got to be raised at council, but it's also got to be raised here because this is what we're talking about today. So, you know, great, there's peppermints, they do belong here, but we do need to have those marries. And, you know, I'm not going to put us through the agony of the advice note, but I will be raising these issues until we get some understanding about what kind of devastation these developments are causing in our environment and in our communities in terms of the environmental damage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just speak to the item and just say that once again, the officers at council have reviewed it in conjunction with the applicants and proposed an amended approval which covers the planning framework. It doesn't substantially alter the original approval or the intent of the original approval, and the modifications are all supported. So to that extent, I'll be supporting the application and move to Francesca Lafanti to close debate on the item.
Thank you. My only comments I have in terms of item 5 and closing debate is that, as I've already said, I'm satisfied that the proposal changes are suitable in context of the development. I'd also make a comment that there is always the proposal has appropriately addressed the balancing of the development purpose of the site with landscaping. And whilst I note there is a reduction, the on-site landscaping does sit above the 10% requirement, and I think that's an appropriate outcome for the site as well. So those are my closing remarks in relation to the proposal, and I have no further comments to make.
Okay, thank you. That being the case, I'll put the item as amended, and just so that we are very clear on the proposal, we are voting on the suggested conditions for the amended proposal, and also replacing the original condition 3 and 22 with those proposed by the proponent, and they were on the presentation with changes to the condition and annotation on the plan. So that being the case, I'll put the item to a vote. All those in favour? 3, 4, and sorry, Councillor Catalano, did you vote?
Against. I'm against.
You're against. Okay, thank you. 3, 4, and 1 against. Okay, thank you. That was item 4 on our agenda. Thank you, presenters. Item 5, there are no SAT considerations. Part C of the agenda, item 1, there are SAT applications, Supreme Court appeals, they're all listed on the table. And item 2 being the meeting closure, I'll close the meeting at 10:23 a.m. Thank presenters, council staff and other panel members and the secretary. Thank you.
Thank you.